Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told counterparts that an attack by Iran and Hezbollah against Israel could start as early as today, any moment, in fact. Blinken has been trying to generate last-minute diplomatic pressure on Iran and Hezbollah to minimize the retaliation to prevent an all-out war, but, you know, who knows? It feels like we're right on the edge. Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi visited Tehran yesterday in the first visit in almost a decade. Jordan concerned that Iranian missiles and drone attacks will pass through its airspace, just like those drone attacks did here a few weeks ago. Joining me now to discuss this and more, Lieutenant Colonel Allen West. Colonel, nice to see you today.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Steve. Thank you.
And I want to get to that, and that's really important. But first, I want to talk about what we touched on in the break just before you came on, and that is the markets around the world are in terrible shape today. In fact, the worst day in Japan for the Nikkei since 1987. We saw the NASDAQ drop more than 1,000 points today, worst it's ever done ever. Right now, the Dow's down about 1,100. The NASDAQ's at about 665. The S&P down, about 175. That's 3.5%, 4%, 2 3/4. More than $1 trillion wiped off the board today, maybe more. And you just got to say, and I look at that and I say, this is the result of bad policies. This is Bidenomics coming home to me.
No, you're absolutely right. So the malaise that we have been seeing and feeling down on Main Street has now crept up to Wall Street. And especially when they see these polls that are showing someone like a Vice President Kamala Harris actually being in the hunt to be the president of the United States of America. And this is someone that is a complete blank slate, other than the fact that we know that she has supported all of this excessive spending and the rise of the inflation. But we don't know what her policies are going forward because the media continues to hide her away from talking about these tough issues.
Yeah, and this is just one example of, okay, here's failed domestic policy. And then you look at what's happening in Israel, because, look, I don't believe that any of these things would be happening if Donald Trump were in the White House. I don't think Tehran would be contemplating an attack against Israel, but they see the indecisive nature of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and this entire administration when it comes to Israel, waffling on whether we support them or not. It puts us into this position of real danger of not just a war with Hezbollah, but a much wider regional conflict, doesn't it?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And think about it, put it in these comparative analysis terms. You know, President Trump said that we're going to move the embassy of the United States of America from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And of course, all the usual characters started with their saber rattling. Nothing happened. President Trump had the Abraham Accords, where all of these nations were sitting down and signed a peace agreement with Israel. And so now all of a sudden you go to where we are today, when we had Iran virtually bankrupt as the #1 state supporter of Islamic terrorism. Now they have themselves flush with cash because the Biden administration has lifted the sanctions on them. They're selling their oil to China. They're exporting their drones to Russia to be used in Ukraine. And you're right, the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, now they all have the resources and the financing they need because the Biden administration has enabled this. So we have gone from a peace through strength to a weakness, which is enticing. And that's why you see Israel and much of the world on fire.
Yeah, much of the world on fire. So what do you anticipate here? Do you have any tea leaves? Do you think Tehran's coming? When they responded before here a few weeks ago, they sent this massive wave after wave of drones, most of which never, I'm not sure any of them made it to Israeli airspace because Jordan, and we just heard their foreign minister is in Tehran for the first time in a decade, and Iraq took out those drones before they ever made it to Israel. Well, what happens this time if you're going to take your best guess?
I don't think that any of those nations, like you just mentioned, Jordan especially, and Saudi Arabia or even Egypt, want to see an escalation of this because they know it does not bode well for them. But the linchpin is what will be the reaction and response of the United States of America. And I think that Tehran and all the other enemies of America right now are sitting around saying, who's in charge in America? I mean, is it the guy who got on the airplane after the hostages were released? Is it the person that tried to give some commentary after those hostages were released? I mean, this is a salivating moment for them. And I think that they're going to push the envelope because they know they have a window of opportunity to advance their goals and objectives.
On that note, how does Kamala Harris solve any of those issues?
She doesn't. She doesn't have the capability or capacity to do so. And that is the thing that, is most troubling for me, is that it is not just the person that is absent from being the president right now. It's the person that, could potentially be the next president. We don't have anyone in charge of the United States of America when it comes to our national security, our foreign policy. And sadly, again, as you discussed earlier, we have a very complicit media that is covering for these individuals.
Yeah. Individuals, imbeciles, interchangeable, however you'd like to put it. But we have no domestic policy because economically, American families are being pummeled, and on the foreign affairs, not doing much better. Colonel, always greatly appreciate you being here, sir. Thank you.
My pleasure. God bless. Take care.